They say betrayal strikes when you least expect it. I never believed in that before. I always thought you'd see the signs, catch the lies in the little things, feel the shift in the air. But for me, it wasn't like that at all. Olivia didn't fit the usual mold. There were no long silences, no sudden coldness, no yelling or accusing. No, she was different. She was closer than ever, more affectionate in a way I hadn't seen in months, maybe even years. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, but at the time, it was like trying to see a shadow in broad daylight. She got more energetic out of nowhere. It was like she'd come back to life. She started obsessing over the house, cleaning like it was some kind of competition, scrubbing every corner until it practically gleamed. She cooked meals that looked like they belonged in a fancy restaurant, and we'd have these elaborate dinners just the two of us, even though we'd been on autopilot for years when it came to that stuff. She kept pushing us to go out more, too. Dinner dates, weekend getaways, spontaneous day trips. At first, I thought, well, maybe she's just rediscovered her passion for life. It felt good. She seemed happier, so I figured I should just go with it. What did I know? But as time went on, things didn't add up. It wasn't just that Olivia was trying harder. It was that she was trying too hard. It was almost like she was overcompensating, like she was hiding something. There were moments when I'd catch her acting strange, like she was looking over her shoulder when I'd walk into a room. And her phone, she'd always leave it face down, even when we were at home together. It wasn't like her. Olivia had never been overly secretive before. Her messages became more cryptic, and sometimes she'd just sit there staring at it, almost like she was waiting for it to beep. I remember I'd ask her about her day, and she'd give me these short, vague answers, like she was trying to avoid telling me anything real. It all started to gnaw at me, but I told myself it was just paranoia. I tried to ignore it. Maybe I was just being insecure. Maybe I was reading too much into things. But then came the gala. The night that would change everything. Olivia worked at a prestigious law firm, and every year they threw this big, fancy gala. She was always eager to go, but this year, she was especially excited. She told me it would be a good opportunity for me to meet some of her colleagues, maybe network a little. She talked it up like it was going to be this amazing event, and honestly, I was just happy she wanted me to come. It had been a while since we did anything together, and I was hoping this would help us reconnect. When we arrived, I could feel the vibe immediately. This wasn't a regular event. The place was huge, all marble floors and glittering chandeliers. There were waiters gliding by with trays of champagne, and the room was full of people who looked like they belonged in some magazine. Olivia, of course, was right at home. She looked beautiful, stunning, really. I remember standing beside her for a moment, taking it all in, and feeling like I didn't quite fit in. And then she vanished. I stood there, holding my glass, trying to act like I knew what I was doing. But Olivia was nowhere to be found. She told me she'd be back in a minute, but time stretched on. An hour went by. Then 2. I tried to mingle with some of her colleagues, but they were all too caught up in their own conversations to really notice me. I felt like an outsider in my own life. Every time I glanced around the room, I expected to see Olivia, but she was always somewhere else. After a while, I just gave up trying to find her. I spent the rest of the night alone, awkwardly nursing my drink, trying to make small talk with strangers. It wasn't until much later that the weight of it hit me. Olivia's absence wasn't an accident. I didn't know it then, but it was the first real sign that something wasn't right. She didn't just vanish at that gala. She was avoiding me. I didn't know who she was with, or where she'd been, but I started to feel the first real cracks in our marriage. It wasn't a dramatic moment, but I remember standing there in the middle of that fancy ballroom, feeling like I was being left behind. Like she was already gone, and I just hadn't caught up yet. I couldn't shake that feeling. The next few weeks only made it worse. After the gala, things started to spiral in small but noticeable ways. It wasn't a massive, earth-shattering thing at first. It was like I was slowly waking up to the reality that maybe Olivia wasn't the person I thought she was. I started noticing more things, little things that shouldn't have bothered me but did anyway. Her phone, for one. I don't know why, but I couldn't help but notice how she treated it. It wasn't just face down anymore. She'd carry it around with her all the time, even to the bathroom. And she'd check it constantly, like there was something urgent happening. If I walked into the room and she was texting, she'd quickly hide the screen, and I'd catch that brief flash of panic in her eyes. It was subtle, but it was there. I didn't say anything about it at first. I told myself I was overthinking things. But that wasn't the only thing. She started going out more too, things she'd never been interested in before. Late-night work events, last-minute dinners with colleagues. Her excuses were getting flimsier by the day. At first, I told myself it was normal. She had a demanding job, and I didn't want to be the kind of husband who questioned every little thing. But the longer it went on, the more it felt like she was trying to pull away. Like she didn't want to come home. When she did get home, it was like she was physically there but emotionally checked out. She'd make dinner, or sometimes we'd watch a movie together, but I could tell her mind wasn't really in it. It wasn't long before I started questioning if this was just a phase, or if something deeper was going on. I kept pushing it down, pretending everything was fine, but the cracks kept getting bigger. I started to look for signs, anything to prove that I wasn't crazy for feeling this way. I checked her social media, which felt dirty, but it was like I couldn't stop myself. It wasn't like her to hide things, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that she was doing just that. But when I went through her phone, there was nothing there. Just a bunch of work emails, text messages with friends. But I didn't trust it. My gut told me there was something I wasn't seeing. And then one night, it happened. I was up late working in the study when I heard her come in. She was quieter than usual, almost sneaky, and I couldn't figure out why. When I walked into the living room to say goodnight, I saw it. Olivia's phone was sitting on the coffee table. The screen was lit up, and for a second, I just stared at it. It was an accidental glance, but I couldn't help myself. The message that flashed on the screen stopped me in my tracks. It was from a guy named Max. "Can't wait to see you tonight," it read. My heart dropped into my stomach. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to feel. I wasn't ready for this, but there it was, staring me in the face. I stood frozen in the doorway, trying to make sense of it, but all I could hear was the pounding in my chest. I didn't confront her then. I couldn't. I just walked away. I couldn't breathe. My mind was racing, but I couldn't let myself believe what I'd just read. Max. Who the hell was Max? I had never heard that name before. And why was she texting him like that? I tried to go back to work, but I couldn't concentrate. The words kept repeating in my mind, over and over. I kept thinking about how much I'd trusted her, how much I thought we had. But now I had no idea who she was. I wanted to confront her right then, but part of me, some stubborn, broken part, still wanted to believe that I had it all wrong. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just a friend. But deep down I knew. The seed had been planted. The truth was somewhere out there, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next day, I decided to take a different approach. I wasn't going to accuse her outright. I was smarter than that. I needed to know for sure, and if I was right, well, I'd need to be ready. But I couldn't keep living in the dark. The uncertainty was eating me alive. So I began paying attention. I started following her more closely, watching her every move. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but I didn't have a choice. I had to know. The next few days felt like I was living in a weird fog. On the surface, everything with Olivia seemed normal. She was still the same, chipper, eager, pushing for more quality time together. She didn't know it, but she was dancing on the edge of a cliff, and I was watching her every step. It was like I was playing a role in a movie, the quiet observer in the background, while everything inside me was screaming to just tear the mask off. But I couldn't. Not yet. I still needed more. I needed her to think everything was fine, to keep acting like she was the loving wife she used to be. If I confronted her now, it'd be a disaster. She'd deny everything, cry, play the victim. No, I needed to expose her in a way she couldn't weasel out of. I was calculating it all in my head, every move. I wanted her to feel trapped, caught in her lies, surrounded by everyone who mattered to her, all of them watching as her world crumbled. So, I kept my distance, and Olivia seemed to notice the change in me. She'd do these little things to try and draw me back in, running her fingers through my hair, whispering sweet things when she thought I was listening, even cooking me dinner just the way I liked it. But it all felt empty. I couldn't even look at her without seeing the lies she'd been feeding me for months. It made me sick. And still, I waited. One night, Olivia came home from work and asked me if I wanted to go out to dinner. Normally, I'd say yes in a heartbeat, but that night something shifted. I didn't want to pretend everything was fine anymore. I needed to break the cycle. "I think I'll stay in tonight," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'm not feeling up to it." She paused, looking at me like she was trying to figure me out. It was a strange moment of silence. She wasn't expecting me to turn down her offer. She was so used to me going along with whatever she wanted. Her eyes flicked to the phone in her hand, and I saw that slight tension in her jaw. She was hiding something. It was almost like she was afraid I'd see through her. "Okay, well, I'll just grab something for myself then," she said, clearly caught off guard by my reaction. That's when I knew. She wasn't just playing me, she was hiding something. She didn't want me to be around when she slipped away again. She needed me to be gone, distracted, because she had something planned. I didn't know what, but I could feel it. And then, like clockwork, her phone buzzed. I didn't even hesitate. I wasn't about to let this moment slip by. "I'll be right back," she said, stepping into the kitchen as I followed her. She barely got the words out before I snatched the phone from the counter. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady as I unlocked it, my eyes scanning the screen. It was a text from Max, the guy she'd been seeing behind my back. This time, there was no mistaking it. "Can't wait to have you to myself tonight." He's gone, right? I froze. For a second, the world felt like it was spinning out of control. The last shred of doubt I had was gone. It wasn't just an affair. It was something that had been planned, calculated. She'd been sneaking around, making sure I was out of the way so she could be with him. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was suffocating. Olivia came back into the room just then, and her eyes locked onto mine. She saw the phone in my hand, and I saw the way her face changed instantly. She knew. She knew I had seen the truth. "Is this what you've been doing?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger, hurt, disbelief. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her face went pale, and I saw the panic in her eyes. She tried to grab the phone from me, but I pulled it away, holding it up so she couldn't reach it. "Who is he, Olivia?" I asked, almost whispering it, though it felt like I was yelling. "How long has this been going on?" She stammered, trying to come up with something, anything. But it was clear she knew there was no way out. Her defense was falling apart, and I wasn't going to let her hide behind excuses. "You're not even going to try to deny it?" I pressed, staring at her, watching her crumble. "You think I'm that stupid?" She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't mean for this to happen. It's just, I don't know. I was unhappy." "You were unhappy?" I snapped, cutting her off. "So, you thought the solution was to sleep with someone else? To lie to me for months, make me feel like I was crazy, all while you were out with him? Is that how you fix things?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. The words were meaningless now. I was done with the hurt, done with the pretending. It wasn't just about catching her anymore. It was about taking back control, about making sure she knew I wasn't going to let this go. No more games. No more pretending I didn't know what was really happening. Her lies had been exposed, and now it was time to make her face the consequences. "I'm done, Olivia," I said, my voice colder than I thought it could be. "You've made your choice. I'm making mine." And with that, I turned away, walking out of the room, leaving her standing there, speechless. The game was over. The days after that night were like a whirlwind, everything spinning out of control and crashing down all at once. I wasn't even sure what I was feeling anymore. Anger, betrayal, exhaustion. The shock had worn off, but now it was replaced by something far worse. The hollow feeling that comes when you realize the person you loved, the person you trusted, wasn't who you thought they were. Olivia didn't say much after that night. She cried. She begged. She tried to apologize, but her words fell flat. She knew it was over. She knew I wasn't going to buy the "I was unhappy" excuse. It didn't matter what she said. The damage was done. And frankly, I didn't care about her reasons anymore. I wasn't interested in hearing her rationalize her actions. Every time she opened her mouth, all I could hear was the lies. She tried to hold on though. She would leave me long voicemails, teary, pleading messages begging for forgiveness, telling me she'd fix things, that she was willing to do anything. But I never picked up. I couldn't. Every time I thought about giving her the benefit of the doubt, I remembered the look on her face when she saw the text messages on her phone, the way she knew she was caught, the way she stopped trying to defend herself. I wasn't going to let her make me feel sorry for her. She made her bed. I took time off work. I needed it. I spent most of the first week just trying to get my head straight, to breathe again. I didn't want to be around people. I didn't want to talk about it. Every time I thought about Olivia, my stomach twisted. She'd left me hanging for months, feeding me lies, while I was left trying to figure out where I went wrong. But now I was done. It was clear she had moved on, emotionally if not physically, a long time ago. And I wasn't going to keep living in the shadow of that. I stayed with a friend for a few days after I told her to pack her stuff and leave. It was one of those moments where I felt like I was watching someone else's life, not my own. I had to force myself to stand firm. The last thing I needed was to get dragged back in by her apologies. I didn't want to hear how sorry she was or how she didn't know what happened. I knew exactly what happened. She betrayed me. She didn't just make a mistake. She chose to hurt me. I kept busy, trying to drown out the pain by working out more, going out with friends, getting my life back in order. But the reality of it all hit me in waves. I kept thinking back to the good times, before all this, when I truly believed in us. And that made it hurt even more. Because the person I thought I knew, the person I had trusted, was gone. And she wasn't coming back. Then came the hardest part, the public exposure. I wasn't going to just let Olivia get away with this quietly. I'd spent years building a life with her, and now she was going to feel the weight of what she did. I wasn't going to let her just disappear, pretend everything was fine. If she thought she could just walk away from this without consequences, she was wrong. I'd spent days crafting a plan, making sure it would be perfect. I reached out to her closest friends first, those who'd been there for us over the years, the ones who didn't know what had been going on. I knew they'd be shocked, but I didn't care. It was time they knew who Olivia really was. Then came the harder part. Her family. They didn't deserve to be left in the dark. They were good people, and they deserved to know the truth about their daughter. The truth about the woman they thought was one thing but was clearly another. I sent a few carefully worded messages, each one revealing just enough to make sure they wouldn't come back at me with questions. I didn't need to explain myself. The facts spoke for themselves. But the real climax of it all came at the law firm's next gala. The place where everything first started to unravel. I had been planning this for weeks. I knew Olivia would be there, and I knew she'd be expecting everything to be fine again, like it had always been. She'd show up, all dressed up in her expensive gown, pretending everything was normal. But I had other plans. I contacted the event organizers weeks before, making sure the timing was perfect. I arranged to have a quiet meeting with Olivia during the gala, claiming I wanted to discuss us, and that I was open to talking about reconciliation. She had no idea what I was really planning. She thought this was a chance to talk her way out of everything, to sweet-talk me back into the relationship. When she walked into that room, looking so confident, I could hardly keep from smirking. It was a beautiful sight. Olivia, thinking she could control the narrative again. But the moment she saw the crowd of people waiting for her, the ones she had trusted, the ones who meant the most to her, her face changed. The silence in the room was deafening when I started talking, calmly, deliberately, making sure every word I said hit its mark. Olivia, I began, I know you've been having an affair for months. I know all about Max. And I know you thought you could get away with it. But I'm not letting that happen. Not this time. Her eyes widened, and I could see the panic in her expression. She tried to speak, to interrupt, but I wasn't about to let her ruin this moment. I told them everything, every detail. I pulled up the messages, the photos, the lies she'd told me. I made sure they all understood exactly what kind of person they were dealing with. The room was still, the only sound the rapid beat of my heart. For the first time in a long time, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't hiding anymore. And Olivia. Olivia was trapped. Her reputation was shattered in front of everyone who mattered to her. I didn't need to say anything else. The damage was done. I thought exposing Olivia at the gala would give me the closure I needed, but what I didn't expect was the storm of emotions that would come after. The looks on her face as I laid out everything, her lies, her betrayal, the affair. It was almost like I had broken her in front of an entire room full of people. But honestly, that was the point. I wanted her to see what it felt like to be humiliated, to have her carefully constructed life crumble. I wanted to watch her realize that everything she'd built on lies was now shattered. The aftermath hit like a freight train. When the crowd dispersed, the looks from the guests were, well, I wouldn't say sympathetic, but they were definitely uncomfortable. Olivia tried to scramble, to salvage what little dignity she had left, but it was clear that no one in that room was going to pretend like nothing had happened. People started whispering, eyes darting to her, and I could see it, the beginning of her fall from grace. It wasn't just me anymore. Everyone knew what she'd done. Olivia tried to reach out to me in the days that followed. She was desperate, calling and texting non-stop, trying to apologize, telling me she was so sorry, but her words felt hollow. I didn't pick up. I didn't answer her messages. She sent long, tear-filled emails, telling me how much she loved me and how she regretted everything, but I was done listening. I was past caring about her remorse. She started showing up at my place, banging on my door, begging me to talk to her. I kept the blinds closed, sitting in the dark, just listening to the muffled sound of her voice outside. I couldn't even bring myself to open the door. She had made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. What struck me the hardest wasn't her desperation, it was the complete lack of accountability in her words. Every time she reached out, it was all about her. I'm so sorry, I made a mistake. But there was never any real understanding of what she had done, not to me, and certainly not to herself. There were no apologies for the broken trust, no recognition of the pain she'd caused. It was all about her guilt, her shame. She never once admitted that she had cheated because she didn't respect me enough to be honest, or because she was too selfish to confront whatever problems we had. Instead, she acted like it was some accident, like she just tripped and fell into an affair. No. Olivia. You made choices. You actively deceived me. And now, you were reaping what you sowed. The hardest part of all this, though, wasn't dealing with Olivia's constant attempts to win me back. It was facing the people who had once been our friends. After the gala, word spread fast. I wasn't prepared for how quickly people would take sides or how many would just stop talking to me altogether. Some of her closest friends didn't believe me. They still defended her, called me the angry husband who didn't understand. They said I was overreacting. One friend even suggested I was ruining Olivia's career. I couldn't believe the audacity. They were defending her? After everything she'd done? It was like they didn't even care about the truth. They just wanted to ignore it. It was in that moment I realized who my real friends were. I wasn't angry at them, but it was clear to me now. I didn't need them. I didn't need people who were too blind to see the truth. As for Olivia's family, they were a different story. Her parents, especially her mother, were horrified when they found out. I'm sure Olivia told them her side of the story. Her sob story about being unhappy and how she just made a mistake. But they couldn't deny it for long. The messages, the photos, everything I'd sent them, made it impossible for them to take her side. They didn't blame me. Her mother called me, crying, apologizing for what Olivia had done, but it didn't make things any better. They were all shocked by the depth of her betrayal. They never saw it coming. Honestly, neither did I. But what really cut deep were the people who did believe me, those who did know the truth, and still acted like I had somehow brought it on myself. They said things like, you must have seen the signs, or she wouldn't have done it if you had been more supportive. I just wanted to scream at them. How could they not see it wasn't about me? How could they not understand this wasn't a failure on my part, but on hers? I wasn't perfect, but I didn't deserve this. No one did. I thought about confronting those people, telling them off, airing everything out. But then I realized something. It wasn't worth it. Olivia had ruined her reputation with the people who mattered most to her. She didn't need me to do the dirty work anymore. They saw her for what she really was now, and that was enough. But I also knew this wasn't the end of it. She wasn't going to just walk away quietly. Olivia was always going to be the type to fight to the bitter end. I knew it wasn't over, not yet. The next week, she showed up again. This time, she didn't even bother with the usual excuses. She was direct. She wanted a final conversation. She sat across from me in a quiet cafe, the last place I expected to meet. She looked different. More fragile, more vulnerable, but still not quite broken. She wanted me to understand that she had been lost in the affair, that she had gotten caught up in something she couldn't control, and that she was willing to do anything to make things right. I didn't listen. I couldn't listen. I told her that it was too late for apologies, too late for her to try and fix things. I told her that I was done, that I was moving on, and that I wasn't going to let her back into my life. When I left, I didn't feel better. It wasn't like some Hollywood movie where the guy walks away feeling like a hero. It wasn't like I got a weight lifted off my shoulders. No. It was just a quiet, painful certainty settling in. Olivia was gone. And so was everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and trust. What followed was the long, slow process of healing. I couldn't rush it. And I wasn't going to pretend like it didn't hurt. But I had learned one thing. No matter how hard it seemed, I was stronger than I thought. And I would be okay. Maybe even better. In the weeks that followed, I kept to myself mostly. I spent a lot of time alone, trying to figure out what my life was supposed to look like without Olivia in it. It wasn't easy. Every corner of my apartment reminded me of her. The empty chair at the dinner table. The way she used to leave her shoes by the door, or the smell of her perfume that still lingered in the sheets. It was like she had left a piece of herself in every part of my life, and taking that away felt like a slow burn. I started doing little things to reclaim my space, to take it back from the memories. I threw out the old pictures of us, those happy moments I'd once cherished, now tainted by her betrayal. The photos of our vacations, our anniversaries, even our wedding day. I didn't burn them, because I wasn't interested in adding more drama to this. But I packed them away, tucked them in a box under the bed. I wasn't ready to destroy them entirely, but I wasn't going to let them haunt me either. I focused on work. It was the one thing I could still do without feeling like I was suffocating. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I'd catch myself staring blankly at my computer screen, my mind wandering back to Olivia's lies. But I pushed through. The bills needed to be paid, and life, somehow, went on. I started hitting the gym more regularly, too. At first, it was just to keep busy, to keep my mind from spiraling. But something changed after a few weeks. The physical exhaustion began to feel like an escape. When I was lifting weights, running on the treadmill, or hitting the bag at the gym, it was the only time my mind was quiet. For the first time in ages, I felt like I was taking care of myself, really taking control of my life again. Still, I wasn't prepared for the moments when the pain would catch me off guard. Sometimes, when I'd come home after a long day, I'd find myself reaching for the phone to call Olivia, only to remember that she wasn't there. The habit of calling her after work, of sharing stupid little details about my day, was so ingrained in me, it felt like losing a part of myself. I found myself thinking about her a lot in the first month after everything went down. It wasn't about wanting her back, it was about the way she'd made me feel, the way she had broken me. I kept replaying our last conversation in my head. The way she'd begged me, how her eyes welled up with tears as she tried to explain herself. The worst part was, I could tell she really thought she could talk her way out of it. That I'd just forgive her, let her back in. I hated myself for even considering it for a second. I hated how much power she still had over me. But I wasn't going to let her have that power anymore. There was a certain kind of freedom that came with finally saying, enough. I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for me. Over time, the calls stopped. The texts stopped. Olivia finally gave up, as much as it hurt her ego. I'm sure she'd told herself she was just giving me space, but deep down, I knew she was just waiting for me to break. Waiting for me to beg her to come back. But I wasn't going to. One day, a few months after the gala, I ran into Olivia at a coffee shop. It was the first time I'd seen her since I kicked her out. She looked different. More put together, maybe a little thinner, like she had been focusing on herself. but there was something about the way she carried herself that was off. Her confidence wasn't the same. There was a vulnerability in her eyes now, one that I hadn't seen before. She was no longer the woman who had lied to me for months. She was just her. I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want to hear her explain herself again. Didn't want to hear any more of her excuses. But she came over to me anyway, her footsteps hesitant, as if she wasn't sure whether to approach or not. "Hi," she said softly, almost nervously. "I didn't expect to see you here." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Yeah, I wasn't expecting it either." She hesitated, then sat down across from me, like she had the right to. Like we were old friends catching up. I wanted to apologize," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I don't know if it matters, but I am really sorry for what I did. I wasn't fair to you. I hurt you, and I regret that more than I can say." She paused, her eyes searching mine for something. Anything, I guess. A sign that maybe, just maybe, I'd forgive her. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm, even though everything inside me wanted to explode. "I don't need your apology, Olivia. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't change what you did. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm also not going to pretend it didn't happen." Her face tightened, like my words stung more than she was willing to admit. "I just want you to know that I'm not the person I was before. I've changed. I've learned so much from this." I looked at her for a long moment, then shook my head slowly. "I'm glad you're trying to change, Olivia. But you have to understand that I can't be a part of that. I can't go back. Not after everything." She stared at me, her lips trembling like she was on the edge of breaking. But then, just as quickly, she nodded, her face hardening, like she was trying to accept it. "I get it," she said quietly, standing up to leave. I really hope you find what you're looking for." I watched her walk out of the coffee shop, and for a moment, I thought I might feel something. Regret. Anger. Something. But I didn't. I just felt free. There were no more questions, no more wondering what could have been. There was just me, finally walking away from the wreckage she left behind. I was done. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was ready to move on. It wasn't like I woke up one day and felt okay. That's not how it works when someone you love betrays you in the way Olivia did. There's no magic moment where everything just clicks back into place. It took time, a lot of time, but I could feel something slowly starting to change within me. The weight wasn't as heavy anymore. The first few months after Olivia were a blur of small victories. It wasn't like I was suddenly this happy, healed version of myself. More like I was gradually getting back to me, even if I wasn't entirely sure who that was yet. I started doing things I'd forgotten I loved, reading more, picking up hobbies I'd let slip, meeting new people. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty about it. I wasn't trying to fill a void. I was just living, in a way I hadn't been able to in years. I went on a few dates after a while. Nothing serious. Just trying to get used to the idea of being around someone else. It felt strange at first, sitting across from someone new and feeling that awkwardness, like I was wearing someone else's skin. But little by little, I started to remember what it felt like to laugh with someone, to feel that nervous excitement when they text you. And yeah, it was fun. But it wasn't love. Not even close. I realized something important during those months. I wasn't looking for someone to replace Olivia. I was learning how to be alone again, how to enjoy my own company. I didn't need someone else to fill the gap. It wasn't about fixing me, it was about accepting that I was enough, just as I was. For the first time in a long time, I felt comfortable in my own skin again. And that felt like progress. But there were hard days, too. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, a flash of memory would hit me. Olivia's voice, the way she used to laugh, the way she'd look at me when she said she loved me. And in those moments, the pain would hit all over again. The betrayal, the lies, the way I was left scrambling for answers when I'd had none. It was like I was mourning two different people. The woman I had loved and the woman she had become. I spent a lot of time thinking about that. How did she change so fast? How did I not see it coming? Was it me? Was it her? But eventually, I realized that I couldn't keep looking back. I couldn't keep asking myself what went wrong. The truth was, Olivia made her choices. She chose to betray me, and that was something I couldn't change. What mattered now was how I chose to move forward. I focused on my work, something that had always been a big part of who I was. It wasn't just about making money. It was about feeling like I had control over something again. The steady rhythm of deadlines, meetings, and projects became a lifeline. I'd been in a fog for so long, but now I could see the path ahead clearly, and I was determined to walk it. And then, there was her. I ran into Emily at the gym a few months after everything with Olivia had gone down. Emily was a friend of a friend, someone I'd met a few times over the years, but we never really hung out. She was different, down to earth, easy to talk to. We struck up a conversation between sets, and before I knew it, we were grabbing coffee after our workout. There was something refreshing about how easy it felt. It wasn't like I was trying to fill any void or distract myself from the past. It just felt right. We started seeing each other more often. Dinner, walks in the park, watching movies on lazy Sundays. The kind of simple things I'd missed, but had almost forgotten how to enjoy. There was no pressure, no rushing into anything. I wasn't expecting her to be the one or to heal me, but I could feel myself opening up again, bit by bit. There was something comforting about being with someone who wasn't weighed down by my past, someone who didn't know my story with Olivia and didn't care to. Emily was present. She was genuine, and that was enough for me. But the truth was, I wasn't really ready yet. I still had baggage I needed to sort through, trust issues I hadn't fully dealt with. And while Emily was great, there were days when I'd pull back. I'd get scared. I'd get cold, distant, because I couldn't let myself fall too quickly. The memories of Olivia were still there, lurking in the background. The fear of being hurt again was something I wasn't sure how to shake. One evening, after a few weeks of spending time with Emily, she looked at me over the dinner table and asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Are you okay?" she said, her voice soft but direct. "I mean, I can tell there's something you're holding back. You don't have to tell me, but I just want to know if you're okay with all of this." I had been so caught up in trying to move on that I hadn't realized how much of me was still stuck in the past. I didn't want to drag her into that mess, but at the same time, I knew I had to be honest. "I'm working on it," I said, my voice more honest than I wanted it to be. "It's hard. I don't think I'm really over what happened. I don't know if I'll ever fully be. But I'm trying." Emily didn't pull away. She didn't judge me. She just nodded and said, "Take all the time you need. I'm not in any rush." And for the first time in a while, I felt like I was being seen, not just for the guy who had been cheated on, but for who I was becoming. I wasn't healed yet. I wasn't completely whole. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to carry the weight of the past alone anymore. I wasn't ready to dive into another full-on relationship, but I was learning that it was okay to take my time, to heal at my own pace. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to believe that the person I'd become was someone worth loving. It was a slow road, but I was walking it, and that, in itself, was enough. As the months passed, I began to feel less like I was trying to outrun my past and more like I was finally figuring out how to live in the present. The memories of Olivia, of us, of what happened, started to fade into the background, not completely, but enough that they didn't take up space in my head every minute of the day. It wasn't a sudden thing, this letting go. It was more like peeling back layers of hurt and disappointment, one by one. Each day, each conversation, each small act of moving forward felt like I was slowly putting the pieces of myself back together. I wasn't the same guy I was when I married Olivia, or even the guy I was a year ago, but in a weird way, I wasn't sure I wanted to be. I was becoming someone different. A version of me that was stronger, more self-aware, and maybe even a little wiser. Emily and I kept seeing each other. It wasn't the kind of whirlwind romance I'd had with Olivia. There was no rush, no pressure. Emily wasn't trying to fix me, and I wasn't trying to convince myself that I was ready for anything serious. We were both just figuring things out, taking it one day at a time. She was patient with me, understanding when I needed space, and surprisingly comfortable when I didn't want to talk about my past. She didn't push me, and that was a relief. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself or justify my emotions. I could just be. We spent a lot of time together doing simple things. Going for walks, having dinner at local diners, binge-watching shows we both liked. She introduced me to some new hobbies, like yoga, which, I'll admit, was a little weird at first but turned out to be a good way to clear my head, and cooking meals from scratch. I found myself actually looking forward to the little moments, the unremarkable parts of life that had once seemed so insignificant. They meant something now, something I hadn't appreciated before. And then there was the moment I didn't see coming. It was a Saturday afternoon. Emily and I were at a park, walking along the trail, talking about everything and nothing. We'd been seeing each other for about 6 months by then, and I could tell that something was shifting between us. There was a comfort in our silences now, a quiet understanding that wasn't there at the beginning. At one point, we sat on a bench near the lake, watching the ducks waddle by. Out of nowhere, Emily turned to me with that soft, serious look she got when she wanted to talk about something important. "You know," she said, her voice quiet, "I really like who you're becoming. You've come so far." I glanced at her, unsure of what she meant. "I'm not sure I'm completely there yet," I said with a chuckle, trying to deflect. "Still working on it." But she smiled, like she wasn't fooled. "No, I mean it. I can see it in the way you carry yourself now. You're not trying to hide from what happened anymore. You're not letting it define you. I think that's pretty amazing." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me felt awkward, like I wasn't ready for such a compliment, but another part of me just felt grateful. For the first time, I realized that maybe I was starting to believe it too. Maybe I was healing. Maybe I didn't have to carry the weight of Olivia's betrayal forever. "You've helped a lot with that," I said, looking at her. "I don't think you know how much." Her smile softened. "I'm glad. But I'm not here to fix you. I just want to be here with you, however long it takes." That hit me harder than I expected. She wasn't rushing me. She wasn't trying to make me fit into some perfect idea of what a relationship should be. She wasn't asking me to forget my past, or to be someone I wasn't ready to be. She was just there. And that was enough. That afternoon, after we left the park, we went to grab coffee. As I sipped mine, I found myself thinking about how far I'd come since Olivia. I didn't feel like the same person anymore, but I also didn't feel like I had to be anyone else. I could just exist, without the weight of betrayal on my shoulders, without trying to be something I wasn't. I was becoming a better version of myself, not because of what I'd been through, but in spite of it. There were still rough days, still moments when I'd catch myself staring out the window, lost in thought. I'd remember the pain, the anger, the betrayal. It wasn't something I could just erase. But it was no longer something that defined me. It didn't dictate my future, or my happiness. And as for Olivia, I hadn't heard from her in months. I didn't expect to. She had tried to make her apologies, but I'd already closed that chapter. I was done with her lies and the wreckage she'd left behind. I wasn't bitter anymore though. I had a sense of peace about it all, knowing that I had stood up for myself, that I had walked away when I needed to, and that I hadn't let her destroy me. I had taken control of my own story, and that was something no one could take away from me. I didn't need to be angry or resentful to move on. I just needed to accept that life was messy, that people mess up, and sometimes they don't come back. But I'd be okay. I was going to be more than okay. One evening, as Emily and I were sitting on my couch, watching some ridiculous reality show, I felt a quiet sense of contentment wash over me. It was the kind of peace I hadn't known for a long time, the kind you only find when you've stopped fighting the past and started embracing the future. I didn't have all the answers yet. I didn't know exactly where this road was going, but for the first time in ages, I was looking forward to what came next. It's funny how life doesn't really go according to plan. You think you've got it all figured out, you think you know what's coming next, but the reality is, we're all just making it up as we go along. That's something I've learned over the past year. How little control we really have over the big moments, and how much control we have over the little ones. Emily and I were still going strong. I wouldn't say it was perfect, nothing ever is, but it was real. We had our moments of awkwardness, moments when I would pull back, or when she'd pull back, but we always found our way back to each other. We didn't need to rush into anything. We didn't need to label it or define it. We were just figuring it out. Together. She was the kind of person who didn't need a grand gesture to feel secure. She wasn't like Olivia, who always had to make everything look perfect on the outside. With Emily, it was the small, honest moments that mattered. The quiet dinners, the late-night talks, the way she could make me laugh when I thought I'd forgotten how. She didn't need to heal me, and I didn't need to be fixed. We were just two people, walking side by side, figuring out life as we went. I started feeling like myself again. Really myself. I was getting used to being alone, not just in the sense of being single, but in the sense of being comfortable with who I was without relying on anyone else to define me. I knew I still had a lot of work to do. Trust wasn't something that comes back easily, and there were days when I'd find myself questioning every little thing in the back of my mind. But those days were fewer and farther between. A few months after Emily and I had started seeing each other, I found myself talking about the future for the first time in a long time. We were sitting at that same little cafe we'd gone to so many times before, the one with the cracked wooden tables and the warm, cozy vibe. We were talking about something random, plans for the weekend, maybe, or something trivial like what show to watch next. But then, out of nowhere, she said it. "I've been thinking," Emily started, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup, "about the future. Not like big picture stuff, but what comes next for us?" I looked at her, caught a little off guard. It wasn't a heavy conversation. She wasn't pushing for a serious talk, but still, it made me pause. I had to think about it. I had spent so much time running away from the past, so much time trying to figure out who I was now that Olivia was gone, that I hadn't really thought much about what I wanted going forward. It wasn't that I hadn't had hopes or dreams, but it was more like I had been standing still, afraid to move forward, afraid to hope. But talking to Emily, something about it felt easy. Natural. I think I'm ready," I said, quietly, like I was testing the waters. I wasn't sure what I was ready for exactly. Whether it was more time together, more stability, or just the next step in life. But for the first time in ages, I felt like I was ready for something. She smiled softly, but her eyes were searching, like she was trying to read me. "You don't have to have it all figured out. I just want you to know that I'm here. I'm not in a rush. But I don't want to pretend like this isn't something real." I nodded. "I don't have it all figured out either. But I know this, what we have, it's real. And I'm not letting it go." It was a simple conversation, but for me, it was a milestone. It wasn't about rushing into something or pretending that everything was perfect. It was just about acknowledging that we were both moving forward, together. And that, for the first time in a long time, was enough. In the weeks that followed, things began to fall into place in ways I hadn't expected. I had a few heart-to-hearts with close friends who had been there for me when everything with Olivia first went down. They'd seen the pain, the anger, the confusion, and now, they saw the difference. They saw the guy who was moving forward, the guy who had learned to laugh again, to live again, without the shadow of betrayal hanging over him. There were moments, small moments, when I'd catch myself thinking about Olivia, about what had been, and what I had lost. But those thoughts were no longer sharp or painful. They didn't feel like a weight anymore. They were just thoughts. And that was progress. I wasn't angry anymore. Not like I used to be. I didn't need to hate Olivia, or even wish ill on her. What happened, happened. And she had made her choices, just as I had made mine. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her past define my future. Emily and I didn't talk about it much, but I knew we were on the same page. She wasn't looking for grand declarations. She wasn't asking me to promise anything. But I knew, somewhere deep down, that this was different. There was something solid, something real about what we were building. And that was all I needed. Looking back, I realized that I had spent so much time being afraid of moving on. I had been so focused on the pain, on the betrayal, on the fear of repeating the past, that I had forgotten to live in the present. But now, I could see the future with clarity, not as a series of unanswerable questions or unresolved fears, but as a blank page, waiting to be written. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to pick up the pen.